Hi, yes, everyone. This is Mr. Rahman speaking. So, if you're watching this, you've been selected for Science Catch Up. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a short lesson on reproduction, fertilization, and the developing fetus. And once you've watched this, I'm going to give you a link to complete a quiz on your emails. So, make sure you complete that quiz on your emails after you have watched this clip. So our title is The Developing Fetus, and we're going to learn the stages of development of the fetus whilst it is growing in the mother's uterus. So first of all, do you guys know what the following picture is showing? What is this? Okay, so can you identify the different parts of it? What this is a baby fetus. So this is what all human beings were at the very early stages in their mother's womb. Okay, so can you guys predict how long a 4-week fetus is? So they're about 5 millimeters long. So that is incredibly tiny. That's about half a centimeter. So when you guys were in your mother's wombs, at some point when you were 4 weeks old in your mother's womb, you were about 5 millimeters long, which is about half the size of your pinky. So if you have a look at this picture, okay, can you identify where the head might be or where the heart might be? So before we look at the fetus in more detail, we need to have a recap on what we mean by fertilization. Okay, so in fertilization, we have an egg cell, we have a sperm cell, and what happens is that the sperm cell fuses with the egg cell, and the egg cell comes from the mother, the sperm cell comes from the father. They both fuse to then make what's known as a zygote. So fertilization is when the nucleus of a sperm cell fuses with the nucleus of an egg cell. So fuses means to join. Okay, so once fertilization happens, what's the whole purpose of fertilization? What does it create? And what happens next? So, of course, I'm sure you all know that fertilization is how the beginning of our creation as human beings began. And after fertilization, what happens is that the egg and the sperm cell, they turn into what's called a zygote, which is a ball of cells. So once the sperm and the egg cell, they develop into a ball of cells, it then gets implanted into the soft lining of the uterus of the woman, which is basically the soft lining inside the womb of a woman. Okay, so you can see that this slide is showing the uterus, and the zygote or the embryo is on the inner lining of that. It is now an embryo, and it may take several days to reach the uterus. And then after fertilization, what happens next? What I recommend you guys do is if you look at this link, I will send you the link on your email. So if you open up your email now and click on this link and watch the video and then come back to this clip. Okay, so after fertilization, as we said, the egg cell begins to divide, forming a ball of cells. So this ball of cells will look like, that's what happens when after an egg cell fuses with a sperm cell. We call this a zygote. And then once this zygote develops into an embryo, so you can see this on the picture here, and you might be able to notice quite a big head, and you should be able to notice a small black eye and an arm. And once this embryo starts growing, finger-like projections then grow into the uterus, forming the placenta. So if you look on the picture, you should be able to see some strands, like some long finger-like strands on the picture, and that structure is called the placenta. What do you guys think the placenta might be for? Any ideas why might an embryo need placenta? What does it need that gets transferred through the placenta? So an embryo, just like human beings, it needs food and nutrients to survive. So that happens by the placenta. Okay, so the nutrients and food travels through the placenta vessels, and then through the placenta cord into the embryo. So all of you, when you were born from your mother, you were born with an umbilical cord, which then your doctor snipped off and detached from you. But why do you think you might need an umbilical cord? Why might you need an umbilical cord? So the role of an umbilical cord, okay, some of you mentioned already, is that it joins the fetus, the baby fetus, to the placenta, and it helps transfer food and nutrients to the fetus through that cord. Okay, so when you guys were an embryo in your mother's womb, obviously you can't eat like you do now through your mouth. You were fed through the umbilical cord. So the fetus is surrounded by a fluid-filled sac filled with amniotic fluid. So in this picture, you see the fetus is surrounded by a bubble, and inside that bubble, there's some watery fluid known as amniotic fluid. So what do you think is the purpose of this bubble filled with amniotic fluid? What do you think? Well, if you're thinking that it protects the baby, you're correct. So this bubble, or the amniotic sac, protects the baby against bumps or damage. So if the mother's belly were to take some minor knocks, then the amniotic sac would protect the baby. Of course, if the mother was involved in a serious accident, let's say in a road accident, then the amniotic sac may not be enough to protect the baby. So, have you guys ever heard of a woman's waters breaking? If you have, when a woman's waters breaks, what happens is that the amniotic sac bursts and that fluid from inside that bubble basically comes gushing out. So that's when a woman's waters break, and it means they are ready to give birth. Right, so the next slide, we have a diagram of a fetus, and we need to be able to label a fetus. Okay, so the very top label, this plate-like structure, that is the placenta. Okay, that's where the food and nutrients transfer from the mother into the baby, and then the cord that's attached to the placenta is the umbilical cord that feeds the food and nutrients into the embryo. And then this label here, that's the mother's uterus, that's the lining of the mother's uterus where the embryo rests. And this label here is, of course, the fetus. So at this stage, it's now called a fetus. So in the early stages, it's an embryo. Now it's known as a fetus. And the next label inside this gap here is the amniotic fluid that we talked about. And then the last label at the bottom, that is the cervix, which when the woman is ready to give birth, that opens up and the fetus and the baby comes through there. So have a good look at that diagram. Make sure you know where the labels are. So for the next task, we have a blank diagram. So, and we have the labels 1 down to 7. So 1 is the uterus, 2 is the placenta, etc. So on a piece of paper, see if you can label these keywords on the diagram yourself. Now I know you don't have the diagram in front of you, but you can have a think about which keywords go on the diagram, and then what you could do is you can match the keywords with the descriptions. Try to match the descriptions. Match the keywords with the descriptions on the right. Okay, so for example, so this one at the bottom, this is the name we give to the developing baby once it's past the embryonic stage. So this one would be 3. Okay, pause the video, see if you can label the rest. Okay. Right, so we're going to quickly go through the answers. So in no particular order, so liquid that surrounds the baby as it develops, protecting it from harm. That is the amniotic fluid. It's this one. So that's number 6. Next one, an organ which develops in pregnancy, where all substances such as nutrients and oxygen are passed to the developing baby. That is the umbilical cord. And then the next one, entrance to the vagina. This widens when the baby is ready to be born. That is the cervix, number 7. Okay, so this is the cervix. Next one, this carries nutrients, oxygen, and waste products between the placenta and the fetus. That's the umbilical cord. The next part, the part of the female reproductive system where the baby will come out from when born. That's number 4, the vagina. Okay, so that's number 4 on here. And the last one, the other name for a womb. This is where the baby develops until it is ready to be born. That is the uterus. Okay, so we've got the uterus here. We've got the fetus. It's here. The amniotic fluid. This one, number 6. The umbilical cord is here. That's number 5 here. Placenta is number 2 here. Okay. What you can also do, the red task, is write a short paragraph using the keywords above to describe the different structures of a pregnant woman. So looking at this diagram, in a paragraph, you can describe the different structures of a pregnant woman. Okay, so you can say, for example, the fetus is inside the uterus. The fetus is connected to the placenta through the umbilical cord. This is how the fetus gets its food, etc. Right, so moving on. So I'm going to show you guys a timeline of fertilization. We're going to look at some real life pictures. So first of all, fertilization happens. That's, as we said, is when the sperm cell fuses and joins with the egg cell. So 30 hours after fertilization happens, okay, the fertilized egg cell then, as we mentioned before, turns into a ball of cells, begins dividing, turns into a ball of cells. Okay, this is known as the zygote, as we mentioned before. And then after that, so after about 3 to 5 weeks, the baby's tiny heart begins to beat by day 21. So that's, you can see that lump in the middle of it is the heart. And okay, this structure at the top is what becomes the head. and then you might be able to see its arms begin to form as well somewhere here. The arms, legs, lips, and nose begin to grow. So we can't clearly see them at this point, but they begin to grow at this stage. Now, once we go to week 7, the organs start to grow inside the baby, and the baby starts to move. So now, after week 7, can you see the body parts a lot more clearly? You should be able to see now the arms here. You can see the legs. You can clearly see the eyes, and this entire structure is a head. So all your heads were very big when you guys were a fetus, and you can see the umbilical cord. This is the umbilical cord. So moving on to weeks 8 to 12, the baby now has hands and feet and swims and moves inside a bag of water, which we said is the amniotic sac. Moving on to weeks 13 to 20, the baby can now swallow and starts to try to breathe. It can feel pain and moves around a lot. It has eyebrows and eyelashes now, so you can see the eyebrows start to form. Its facial features have clearly formed, so you can see the nose, see the mouth and lips. The finger is very clearly formed now, so now it's looking more and more like the human being after it's born. Weeks 20 to 24, the baby has hand and footprints now, and it can practice breathing. So your fingerprints that you can see, if you look close at your fingerprints, those start to develop week 20 to 24. Okay, and then weeks 25 to 32, the baby's eyes open and close. It sleeps 90% of the time. So in this stage, the fetus is very, very late. 90% of the time, it's asleep. You can actually see it sucking its thumb in this picture. Weeks 33 to 40, the baby is getting ready to be born. Turns upside down before it's born. Why do you think the baby's head turns upside down before it's born? Well done if you said that it's easier for the woman to give birth with the head upside down because it would be very difficult for the baby to come out feet first. And then finally, after 9 full months, a new baby is born and the umbilical cord is cut. And that's how all of you developed in your mother's uterus and you were born. Okay? So what you can do next is you can have a look at these this timeline. So it tells you in what weeks what happened. So week 8, week 10, etc. And it tells you what happens in each week. So in week 8, the embryo is now called a fetus and has human features. In week 10, the fetus is 7 centimeters long and has all the body parts are in place. Week 20, the fetus has defined toes and begins to grow hair, eyelashes and nails. Week 30, the fetus is 30 centimeters long and the brain is very active. The fetus sleeps and wakes at regular intervals. Week 40, the fetus is fully developed and ready to be born. It is about 50 centimeters long and about 3.5 kilograms. So you can see what the baby or the fetus looks like at each stage. So next, what is the role of the placenta? So it looks a bit gruesome, but this is what comes out connected to all of you when you are born. And as we mentioned before, it's cut off once you're born. Some of you may have heard that for some reason, some mothers they like to eat part of the placenta afterwards because it may have some nutritional value. I don't recommend anyone do that, but that's what some women do. So in the placenta, food and oxygen diffuse from the mother's blood to the fetus's blood, and also waste substances. So you guys, we all take in food and oxygen. So we don't just need food, but we also need oxygen to survive. Take it in, breathe it in, take it into our bloodstream. But we also breathe out, and we also go to the toilet and give off waste products. So the same way, a baby fetus needs to take in food and oxygen through the umbilical cord, and it also needs to give out wastes through the umbilical cord and out of itself. So carbon dioxide and waste products such as urea diffuse the opposite way. So carbon dioxide and waste basically go the opposite way through the umbilical cord and come out of the baby fetus. Right, so for the next task, okay, what you can do is you can use these keywords. So we've got a gap fill here, and we've got the keywords here at the bottom in purple. I want you to read through the gap fill and see if you write down which words you think goes in the gap from this keywords at the bottom here. Okay, so the question is, how does an embryo get food and oxygen, and how does it get rid of waste? So an embryo forms a plate-like structure called and you can pause the video and have a go yourself and then play it once you're ready to go through the answers. Okay, the first one is the structure is called the placenta. The next one, the umbilical cord joins the fetus to the placenta. In the placenta, food and oxygen diffuse from the mother's blood into the blood of the fetus. Carbon dioxide and waste products diffuse from the blood of the fetus to the mother's blood. Okay, so well done if you got those correct. I would write all this down as a paragraph in your notes, just so you make sure you're very clear with that process. So now that's basically the end of the lesson. What I'd like you to do now is, on your email there should be a link to a quiz, and the quiz will be based on this lesson. So this lesson will help you complete that quiz, and if you want to, whilst you're doing the quiz, you can refer back to this video and watch the clips back to help you answer the questions. And the idea is, in the quiz you get a better score and improve upon the score from what you got last time when you did the quiz before. So the whole point of this is that you should be improving. Okay, so once you've closed out this, go back to your emails and complete the quiz. Thank you very much.